Thank you, Rupert. And also on Afghanistan, I have now the pleasure to welcome Dr. Rick Brennan, who's the Regional Emergency Director of Eastern and Mediterranean Region, WHO, who is here with Christian. Christian, I don't know if you want to start and introduce Dr. Brennan, or we go straight to him. Dr. Brennan, you want to start?
Certainly. Can you hear me?
Very well. Go ahead, sir.
Thanks very much. One caveat, my internet is a little unstable. But thank you very much for the opportunity to speak with you all today. As we all know, the situation in Afghanistan remains volatile and tense. Those tragic and shocking events of yesterday have greatly accelerated that tension. All of us at WHO, and I'm sure all humanitarian partners, extend our sincere condolences to the families who have lost loved ones and to the women, men, and children who have been injured. In the very fluid context of Afghanistan, there are many uncertainties and unknowns. But what remains certain is that the humanitarian needs across the country are enormous and growing. We've said it before, even prior to the recent events, Afghanistan represented the third largest humanitarian operation in the world, with over 18 million people in need in the context of conflict, displacement, drought, and the COVID-19 pandemic. And while tens of thousands of vulnerable Afghans are being evacuated through the air operation. Yes.
Dr. Brennan, sorry, you come a little bit broken. Would that be possible maybe to just turn off your camera so that you have a better bandwidth? Maybe the sound would be better. I'm sorry, but we can't hear everything you say. Maybe you want to start the last sentence again because we didn't get it. Thank you.
Okay. How is that now?
Better.
Can you hear me better?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I'm sorry about that. Okay, very good. And while tens of thousands of vulnerable Afghans are being evacuated through the air operation at Kabul airport, millions of vulnerable Afghans will remain behind, and we have to continue to assist them. Our spirit of solidarity must be conveyed not just in words, but in concrete actions. The UN is committed to staying and delivering in Afghanistan. WHO stands together with our other UN partners in that commitment. Of course, in an insecure and volatile setting, our first priority will always remain the safety and security of our staff. Over recent weeks, we have taken all appropriate steps to do so. We continue to monitor the security situation and are making relevant adjustments as needed. Our second main priority is to ensure the continuity of essential health services, especially for the most vulnerable, including women and children. WHO has staff in all 34 provinces across the country monitoring the health situation right now. The good news is that of around 2,200 health facilities that we are monitoring, around 97% remain open and functioning. The more sobering news is that these health facilities are rapidly running out of medical supplies, and WHO is not currently able to meet these needs. We have only a few days of supplies left and are exploring all options to bring more medicines into the country. There are multiple security and logistics constraints to doing so, but we hope and expect that we will be able to bring in more supplies in the coming days with the support of the Pakistan government. Kabul airport is not an option for bringing in humanitarian supplies at this stage, and so we are likely to use Mazar-e Sharif airport with our first flight hopefully going in the next few days. In Afghanistan, as I've said, we are especially concerned about the needs of women and children. Already, we are hearing that some female health workers are not attending work and that there has been a decline in the attendance of women and children at some facilities. This again highlights the need to ensure the availability of medical supplies, to support female health workers in their work, and to encourage families to bring their mothers, their females, the girls and children seek health care when they need it. We have many other urgent health needs right now in Afghanistan, addressing the special requirements of the displaced, treating trauma, controlling the COVID-19 pandemic, addressing malnutrition, and so on. WHO is working on all of these issues. But it is not too early to also look forward and consider how we will continue to provide healthcare in the medium and longer term. Over the past 2 decades, there have been tremendous health gains across Afghanistan. And while Afghanistan remains a tough place to be a woman or a child, we have to remember that maternal mortality rates have reduced by around 60% and child mortality rates by around 50% over the past 2 decades. Moreover, thousands of healthcare workers have been trained, including female health workers, midwives, nurses, doctors, and so on. We cannot have a rolling back of those health gains. Over the coming weeks and months, WHO will be working with donors, partners, and health authorities to establish mechanisms for the continuity of international support for the health system in Afghanistan. That support must be designed in a manner that sustains and further advances the health gains of the past 20 years. Finally, for the past week or so, the eyes of the world have been focused on that major air operation at Kabul airport. But once that evacuation mission ends, the enormous humanitarian needs will continue. And our work will then enter a new phase, which will bring complexities and on a scale that we have not seen before. In spite of these challenges, WHO and the UN will be there for the people of Afghanistan. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Brennan. And as you say, the humanitarian aid is continuing. We have other colleagues from humanitarian agencies connected in case the journalists will want to ask questions. But I also would like to remind everybody that the UN system has appealed for about $1.3 billion for Afghanistan, but about only 39% of this appeal is funded at the moment. So I'll open now the floor for question, and I see, first of all, let me look at the room, if there is any question here. No, so I'll start with Nick Cumming-Bruce and Dr. Brennan, our correspondent of the New York Times. Nick, you have a question.
Very good, thank you, Rick. Good morning, and I'm pleased to see you here. Once the evacuation is open, will Kabul airport become an option for getting supplies in, or are there concerns about who's going to control it? What's your understanding of that situation? Secondly, you mentioned some women are not showing up to work. Is that because they are being stopped or simply because they're concerned? And thirdly, as the evacuation unfolds, are you seeing a large exodus of medical staff? Thanks.
Dr. Brennan?
Thanks. Thanks very much. Thanks, Nick. In terms of operations at the Kabul airport, I think there's still a lot of uncertainty about that over the coming weeks. Once the Americans leave around August the 31st, we understand that the Turkish government, as you probably know, has committed to support operations there, but the timeline on that remains unclear. We're hearing up to 3 or 4 weeks. I don't have any confirmation on that. I heard Anthony Blinken on the television a couple of days ago saying that the Americans were looking at a couple of options to sustain continuity of services at the airport. I think for us right now, we're going to be looking at other options in the short to medium term, such as Mazar-e-Sharif, because of the logistics and security concerns. Of course, further down the track, I mean, Kabul airport, once it's fully operational and security can be guaranteed, we will certainly relook at that. In terms of female health workers, we haven't heard any instances of female workers being stopped from coming to their posts. Our assumption is that they're just being particularly cautious at this time. We haven't heard of any instances of them being physically or otherwise blocked from coming. In terms of evacuation, yeah, I mean, we are hearing of healthcare workers leaving, health authorities leaving, and this is a big problem for all of us in every sector, is the enormous brain drain that's occurring at the present time.
And just to add that the United Nations have been calling for the free access to the airport and the security of the airport for humanitarian operation, as the spokesperson of the Secretary General said yesterday, as it is critical to the comings and goings of humanitarian aid and stuff. Isabelle, Effe.
Good morning. Thank you, Alessandra. I would like I'm sorry I could connect a few minutes after the briefing began, so I don't know if you gave some update on the casualties of yesterday's attack in terms of wounded or that arrived to different hospitals and dead people, and also if these hospitals, how many hospitals are currently functioning in Kabul, being able to give sufficient and appropriate care to wounded people. And related to this question of health staff trying to live in the country, is there actually nowadays enough nurses and doctors working and being able to get to their workplaces in hospitals and other medical facilities? Thank you.
Thank you very much. On this side, we don't have numbers to give. Maybe Dr. Brennan, you have something on that?
I don't have all the numbers at this stage. I mean, we've heard of the number of deaths and upwards of 200 injuries being distributed across the hospitals. Our team is still trying to gather information of what we are hearing. Is, I mean, one of our big partners, the Italian NGO Emergency, who run an excellent trauma hospital in Kabul. We understand that they've been overwhelmed, as you might understand. Of course, getting access to supplies is urgent, and we understand that they've got great pressure on their supplies right now. So our proposed air shipment in the next couple of days will be bringing in more trauma kits. So the bottom line is I don't have all the details, but we can, prior to the event, we understood that all hospitals were functioning, and I'm sure that they're all feeling incredibly pressured by the large number of trauma cases. In terms of enough doctors and nurses across the country, well, in fact, Afghanistan falls well below international standards in the availability of doctors, nurses, midwives, and that's at baseline. I don't know if you heard me say that we're monitoring the availability of health services at around 2,200 health facilities across the country. 97% of them are open and functioning, but some female health workers are not attending for various reasons. And we are seeing this brain drain. So, the health workforce is going to be an issue for us moving forward.
Thank you, Dr. Brennan. Stephanie Nibehe, Reuters.
Yes, thanks. Firstly, Rick, I wondered if you could, if it's possible to turn on your camera, put on the video, because, Reuters TV and probably others are live, and the idea was to have you on camera today with this important readout. Is that possible from Cairo or wherever you are at the moment?
We can try, Stephanie. Let's see if the line stands. Dr. Brennan, can you try again? But if we don't hear you, we'll ask you to close it again.
Okay.
We can see you. Go ahead, Stephanie.
Stephanie, did you have a specific question?
Stephanie, can you come back? Can you please unmute Stephanie?
Yeah, thanks. Okay, I'm unmuted again. Thank you.
Okay, go ahead.
Just going back to the to bringing supplies in, you said Kabul airport's not going to be an option for a while, although some of the other countries are trying to secure it after the departure of the Americans next week. You mentioned Mazar-e-Sharif as an option. How would that kind of work? And would this be in tandem with, WFP's humanitarian air service? Or could you just sort of lay out some of the scenarios for us, please? Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so right now, because of security concerns and several other operational considerations, Kabul Airport is not going to be an option for the next week at least. One of the challenges we have in Afghanistan right now is there's no civil aviation authority functioning. But we're working with the Pakistanis, particularly in the context of Mazar-e-Sharif airport, because they can work with contacts on the ground to ensure that all the necessary steps to land an aircraft, to land a cargo aircraft, can be put in place. So they're working, Pakistan International Airlines is working with colleagues on the ground to facilitate the arrival of cargo aircraft. Now, in terms of the World Food Programme, they are establishing a much needed humanitarian air bridge. The first flights have not taken off yet, but we expect those in the next few days. That's going to fill a much needed gap. We understand that their capacity, at least in the short term, will include aircraft that can bring in around 5 metric tons of supplies at any one time. We're working to bring in upwards of 20, 30 metric tons per flight. So we just need a little bit larger airlift right now. We're working with the Pakistanis on this. Frankly, one problem that has arisen in the last 12 hours is the fact that the insurance costs for bringing in a plane into Afghanistan right now have skyrocketed at prices we've never seen before. So we're trying to jump through that hoop at the moment. Once we can address that, we will hopefully be airborne in the next 48 to 72 hours.
Thank you. And the line was really good. So that's good. Peter Kenny.
Thank you. Peter Kenny from Anadolu News Agency. You've said that Dr. Brennan said that the safety of UN staff is paramount. And I'm just wondering, how many UN staff are there in total in Afghanistan at the moment? And who is going to take care of their security needs in view of the fact that this was such an indiscriminate attack and nobody seems sure of what the government structure is in the country? Thank you.
On this, maybe I can answer. The numbers that we've been giving recently is that we have a little bit more than 100 international staff in country and around 3,000 local staff. Yesterday, the spokesperson of the Secretary General was very clear on this point, and it's based on international law. Obviously, the authorities in control of a territory are responsible for the security of UN staff. So they have a responsibility to keep UN premises and UN staff safe and secure. Jamie Keaton, Associated Press.
Hi, Alessandra. Thank you very much. This one's for Rupert. Rupert, you mentioned ISIL Khorasan. What independent confirmation do you have that they were involved in this? And Dr. Brennan, do you have any information in terms of the forensic sort of side, that the health security that's been provided to the victims of these blasts yesterday, in terms of are there any markers in terms of the wounds and whatnot that can sort of help elucidate who might have been behind this?
Dr. Brennan.
Yeah, hi, Jamie. Look, no, we don't have that type of information. Forensics is not the kind of information that WHO would normally collect in any case. So I really can't answer that question.
Jamie, sorry, we might have missed you a bit. Did you ask any question to Rupert? Was there a question to Rupert?
Yes, I did. I wanted to ask Rupert about just where they, because he said pretty firmly that this is ISIL Khorasan that was responsible for this, and I'm just wondering if you have any independent confirmation of that, or are you just relying on what's been said, and if you could just talk a little bit more about the human rights implications and what could be done, I guess, to improve the situation there, Rupert, to defend better against human rights casualties, human rights abuses and violations?
Sure,
Jamie, ISIL have claimed responsibility on I believe it's on a website they've been using. I think there's little reason to doubt that, but I can't obviously say 100% sure it's them. But I don't think anyone is suggesting it isn't at this point. Let's put it that way. How can you defend better? That's a really tough question. Clearly there was intelligence this attack was going to come when you saw what some states were saying just a few hours before, that they were expecting an attack in the next few hours. But still nobody was able to prevent it. So I really don't have any, I wish I had solutions to thwart the efforts of groups like ISIL, but it's going to be, in the situation the country's in, with general instability, general lack of very coherent security structures and so on. It's going to be very, very hard to deal with this.
Thank you, Rupert. Gabriela Sotomayor, Proceso.
Thank you. Thank you, Alessandra. My two questions. Dr. Brennan, you mentioned that you are running out of medicines. Is that correct? That you don't have supplies? So do you have enough for a week, for a month? What do you need the most? And also another question is to Rupert. Is there any sign or any threat of ISIL against UN personnel or something like that, an attack against UN personnel? Thank you.
Thanks, Gabriela.
Dr. Brennan.
Yeah. So we have just probably only a few days left of supplies. Even before the fall of the government in Kabul just a couple of weeks ago, over the past 2 weeks, we had already planned 3 airlifts of medical supplies into the country. Of course, they were through commercial charters, but they were cancelled because of the security issues and operational issues at Kabul airport. So since then, we've been looking at, through every option to try and bring supplies in. And as I said, now, we had generous offers from the Brits, from the Spanish, offers of support from the Americans in terms of facilitating the airlift into Kabul, but for a variety of operational logistics issues, are looking at the support of the Pakistani government, and of course we'll follow up with WFP once the humanitarian air bridge is established. In terms of the urgent needs, right now we've got supplies ready to go. We have trauma kits, we have emergency health kits, which have essential supplies, medicines, equipment for hospitals and clinics. We also have supplies waiting to go for the treatment of malnutrition and for chronic diseases.
Gabriela, I think as we saw yesterday, ISIL is a threat to everyone, completely indiscriminate attack, and just designed to kill as many people as possible. As for specific threats to the UN, I really can't tell you. I don't know. That would be very much in the hands, of course, of our security colleagues who we absolutely must defer to in the situation of security in Kabul, well, in the whole country right now. But I don't have any specific information about that.
Peter, you had a follow-up?
Yeah, one of them is a clarification from you, Alessandra. I didn't hear the number of local UN staff that you mentioned. And I would also like to ask Dr. Brennan that if all these supplies run out, what is going to be the numerical impact of this? Thank you.
Okay, so as I said, the number we've been giving is around 3,000 local staff, and that number doesn't seem to have changed significantly in the last days. And Dr. Brennan?
Yeah, it's hard to put a figure on numerical impact. I mean, if you're asking us to translate it into the number of health facilities that will be affected, of the ones that we're monitoring, and it'll be around 2,200. If you're looking at it from the perspective of health facilities supported through the World Bank supported project, again, around 3,000 health facilities. I mean, we could do the numbers in terms of people affected. It's going to be difficult to translate that into measures of illness and death, but we can rest assured we will see increased morbidity and mortality arising out of this unless we can get the supplies in a timely manner.
Thank you, Dr. Brennan. Nina Larsen, AFP.
Yeah, thank you for taking my question. I had a question for Rupert. Just seeing the horrifying images from the chaos in Kabul, I was just wondering what obligations the U.S. and the international forces had to avoid this scenario under international humanitarian rights law, and if you see them as breaching that, what should they have done as, basically occupying forces for the past 20 years? Thank you.
Look, I don't think in those kind of circumstances, I mean, yes, the Taliban have effective control in Kabul and most of the country, and therefore they have a responsibility to protect the citizens. But realistically, when you're dealing with something like ISIL, it's very hard to protect the citizens, and so I don't think it would be fair or proper to cast blame, particularly on, if you imagine the credible difficulty of the situation around Kabul airport in recent days. I think to blame anyone who's trying to protect the airport for the failure to stop ISIL would be harsh.
Moussa.
Oui, merci Alexandra. Ma question pour Rupert. Dans votre déclaration, vous demandez à la fin que le responsable de cette attaque soit arrêté et traduit en justice. À qui ce message est adressé? Est-ce qu'il est adressé aux talibans? Et si c'est le cas, est-ce que les Nations Unies ont reconnu les talibans comme pouvoir à Kaboul? Merci.
Good morning, Musa. As I said, the Taliban have effective control of much of the country. But when you're talking a sort of massive crime like was committed yesterday, it's whoever is in a position to capture and prosecute and bestow justice on those responsible. So it could be national, it could be international.
Thank you very much. I don't see any other question. No. So thank you very much. I'd like to thank Dr. Brennan very, very much for being with us today and wish you all the best for your important work in the next period. And thank you very much, Rupert. Let's go to now to UNICEF. We have today with us James and Vera Naus, who's the global lead for migration and displacement, who would like to brief you on a report. I don't know if, James, do you want to start or we go directly to Mrs. Naus?
Hey there, good morning. No, I think we can go straight to our global lead, Verena. Thanks, Alessandra.
Thank you, James. I hope you can hear me all right.
Yes, there's a little bit of a noise on the line, but we can hear you.
Okay, I try to stay close to the microphone.
Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here, and thanks to all the colleagues for the important work they just outlined to save and protect lives in Kabul. I want to present briefly some highlights of a new report called Uncertain Pathways that UNICEF has just published, in which we also try to ask some hard and uncomfortable questions to try and understand better the different experiences by gender that boys and girls go through as they move, as they make decisions to migrate, or as they are forcibly displaced. The data and the experiences presented in the report, they both challenge some of our assumptions about how we think about gender, migration, childhood, but they also point to some really serious blind spots, things we just simply do not yet know, answers we lack, and needs that go unmet because of this. I want to share some of the key findings to give you a sense of what is in the report. So first of all, as many of you know, we are in a place and time where more than ever children are on the move. At the moment in 2020, 35.5 million children live outside their country of birth, either as migrants or refugees, displaced mainly due to conflict, violence, or environmental catastrophes. Many also, though, have left because they wanted to pursue better education or aspirations or reunite with family. In addition, another 23.5 million boys and girls are internally displaced, mainly due to conflict or disasters. If you put these figures together, we're looking at 60 million boys and girls on the move, either outside their country of origin or birth, or forcibly displaced within the country. When we last put our data in the report, uprooted children in 2015, this was 10 million less. Among them are also 13 million refugees and asylum seekers, and nearly half of them, 48%, are girls. While we often tend to get stuck on debates on whether a child is a migrant or a refugee, what is striking is that we seem to be much less interested in whether a migrant or a refugee is a boy or a girl, and what that actually means in terms of the risks and their experiences on their journey. So what are some of the other findings? Well, what we see in the data that is available, there are huge gender disparities, and some of the migratory routes and some of the experiences are highly skewed. So for example, in 2020, 9 in 10 unaccompanied children seeking asylum in Europe were boys. This begs the question, where are the girls in need of protection? And of course, Afghanistan is high on the list of those who arrived in Europe to seek asylum. More than half arriving last year were either from Afghanistan, Morocco, or Syria. Afghanistan also, as we know, of course, and we talked about it just now, is the #1 in the list of top 10 countries of origin for unaccompanied children seeking asylum in Europe. The #3 in the list of top 10 countries of origin for child refugees globally. And overall, across the board, it's always boys leaving more than girls. So how long can we go on without asking, where are the girls? How do they seek asylum? And especially now and in the future, what needs to be done so that access to protection is available to boys and girls? Another finding that the report is laying out with the data that exists is that decision-making on migration is highly gendered, of course influenced by the role of a boy or a girl in the family, expectations on the role of them as breadwinners or as laborers, or the history of a family or a migration context. Girls and boys, to summarize a few of those differences, are motivated for different reasons. Very often girls, for example, they try to use migration as a tactic to delay marriage, while boys, of course, try to use migration, especially in West Africa, as a way to grow and sort of have the passage to adulthood. Migration routes itineraries are highly differentiated by gender. Boys are more likely to migrate longer distances and across borders. Girls are more likely to migrate internally. Boys are also more likely, as we heard before, to travel unaccompanied. Whereas for girls, for example, the questions of social protection in the country of destination or access to healthcare plays a much bigger role in deciding where to go. Risks equally are highly gendered. Among those identified as victims of trafficking, girls outnumber boys 4 to 3. So this goes on top of children making up 1/3 of all trafficking victims worldwide. And this number of child victims has actually doubled since 2004. But also women and girls, as we know, face much higher risk of sexual and gender-based violence and exploitation, which probably plays a huge factor in decision-making, and in skewing migratory routes so shockingly, as we have seen with, for example, 9 out of 10 unaccompanied boys being just male. Access to services also, whether in countries of origin, en route, or in destination, is highly gendered. For example, education, just to name one example, huge differences continue to exist. If you are a girl in a camp, you are 2.5 times more likely to be out of school than boys. This is a shocking inequality. In Dadaab, just one example, for there, 7% of girls aged 14 to 17 are still at school, compared to 22% of boys at adolescent age. So what does it mean for us in terms of policy implications? What needs to change? What needs to be done? A few points just to get us thinking. First, we need to address the blind spots. We need to work better together and be more systematic in data collection, disaggregation by age and gender. We have more than 23 million children internally displaced, and we actually don't know anything about their age and gender. We can guess, we can estimate, but data doesn't exist. Second, what is clear is there are these differences in risks, in vulnerabilities, but also opportunities. We need to move away from one-size-fits-all solutions that just assume that a migrant, a refugee needs one thing or the other. Boys and girls have different needs. We also need to listen and work with young migrants and refugees themselves. They know why and how their decisions are made, where and how they seek services, and where the gaps remain. And last but not least, it's nice to start talking about gender responsive policies, but what we actually need is gender transformative responses. We do have a problem when girls in need of protection cannot leave and cannot access protection, but we also have a huge challenge at our hands if we continue to sail blind, because we actually don't know where boys and girls are, what they need, and where and how we fail them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Verena, for launching this report here in Geneva. I see a question from Lisa Schlein, Voice of America.
Hi, good morning. More of a comment. Your report is so rich. There is so much information. I really can't absorb it. Do you have a press release or some kind of guidance to go through it? Because you zip through it very quickly. It's a very important report, I think. I'd like to do it justice, and I'm not going to ask you questions because I have too many and I don't know how to begin. But if you have, I usually do ask a lot of questions, but I'm not going to this time. But if you do have a press release or some kind of guidance, please send it, and then I can match it up with what you said and maybe make something out of it. Thank you.
Verena, yes, maybe also through James, we can send the information to all journalists.
Yes, absolutely.
Would that eventually be possible, just asking here, to set up interviews?
Yes, I think that's also possible. James would be the man in charge and the point of contact, but very happy to, yeah.
Yeah, James has raised his hand. James, go ahead.
Sorry, just seeking to unmute. Yes, Lisa, I'll send you around, and I'll send everyone around now. I think, again, the key messages and key facts from the document, and absolutely just come through me. We've already got some interviews, and Verena's available today and all of early next week. So yes to both.
And Peter has a question too.
Thanks. And I was just wondering, you mentioned about the Dadaab. You said that only 7% of girls are in school and 22% of boys. What is the percentage of boys and girls at the Dadaab? And I know that a few years ago, Dadaab was considered to be the world's biggest refugee camp. Is it still considered to be so?
Yes, thank you, Peter. I think, unfortunately, that title has been lost to Cox's Bazar. But of course, there's always a question of what is officially declared a camp and what is included and out. But obviously now in Bangladesh, there's a larger number of children concentrated in a place, having been displaced before. But the figures on Dadaab, just to reiterate them briefly for your record, overall, the percentage of girls versus boys among those forcibly displaced, and that also holds true for refugees, is pretty much half-half. So there is very little gender imbalance when you're looking at forced displacement populations, because people make few choices. They're usually just pushed out. You get these very big gender variations when more choices involved and more decision-making is involved, and various factors start playing into this. In terms of the figures of attendance at school, there is a huge drop-off between younger and older kids. So whereas you would have 48% of girls in Dadaab attending preschool or primary school compared to 62% of boys, so the difference is a lot smaller. The age, the gender gap really comes through when you look at the 14 to 17-year-olds, secondary school age. Here you only have 7% of girls in school versus 22%. One big factor, as we know, is of course pressure on girls to then start taking over care duties at home, or even start domestic work or out-of-house work. But another huge factor that we keep seeing is the lack of water and wash facilities at schools, which becomes a huge problem when children hit puberty, and then menstrual hygiene is important. And then, of course, social norms, expectations on girls, fears of their safety, the risks of sexual and gender-based violence at school. All of these factors play into this huge gap where girls just disappear at secondary school age in camp-like settings, in forced displacement settings.
Thank you, Verena. Gabriela Sotomayor, Processo.
Thank you, Alessandra. Yes, I have. If you can give a comment on Mexico, and the Supreme Court in USA allows the revival of this Remain in Mexico asylum policy. So if you can comment on, you know that in the north of Mexico, there is cartels, organized crime, and children that are traveling alone, asylum seekers. They are in big risk. So if you can comment on that, thank you.
Yes, thank you. We are very concerned about the potential risks for children that may not be able to access asylum and protection. We have welcomed the decision of the US government earlier this year to revoke the migration, the MPP, the Remain in Mexico policy, and we have watched with some concern the current court discussions. It remains to be seen what the implications will be on the ground, but certainly for UNICEF, the right of children to access territory to seek asylum must be upheld. And we do not want to go back to a situation where children in need, in particular those who come to the border unaccompanied and have already gone through so much on their journey, need to stay in makeshift camps exposed to all the risks that you described. Perhaps of interest to you, when we talked about and when we look at gender differences along these different routes, in that particular corridor, we also have a pretty strong skewed balance of boys and girls among those who travel unaccompanied, with around 66% of unaccompanied children who did seek asylum in the US, mainly from Central America, being boys, but it is not as striking as it is in Europe, where other data also exists.
Thank you, Verena. Any other question for UNICEF on this report? I don't see any, so I would like to thank Verena and James, and please, yes, send out the information as soon as possible. And before we leave the issue of the humanitarian assistance, just let me remind you that today at 1:30 p.m. we will have a virtual press conference on the presentation of the presentation of the regional refugee preparedness and response plan for Afghanistan. This press conference, we will have quite a few speakers: Kelly Clements, the Deputy High Commissioner, UNHCR, Wafa Saeed Abdelatef, Director of the Coordination Division at OHCHR, Manuel Fontaine, Director of Emergency Programs at UNICEF, and Najiba Wazeda-Frost, the CEO of the Asia Pacific Refugee Network. So again, this is today at 1:30. I think you have now received the invitation from our office. And I now will go to Claire. Claire has a update on a report for next week. Claire.
Yes, good morning, everybody. Sorry I was late, so I missed the start of the briefing and my slot there. We sent out a media advisory yesterday about a report we'll be releasing next week on Wednesday, the 1st of September at 9:30 in the morning. There will be a press briefing by our Secretary General, Professor Petri Pallas, along with the head of the UN Disaster Risk Reduction Office, Mami Mitsutori, and we will be joined, as far as I know, on Zoom by Dr. Maria Nera of the World Health Organization. It's a report, 50 years worth of statistics. The title is The Atlas of Mortality and Economic Losses of Weather, Climate and Water Extremes. So it's 50 years worth of statistics, of analysis of the human and the economic cost of weather, climate and water related disasters. It also gives a breakdown sort of decade by decade. So, you know, just to sort of give more information as to how disasters and are evolving as a result of our changing climate. We will send out the information on Monday under embargo. The press release will be available in all official languages, and the report itself is just in English. So if you need any interviews in addition to the press conference, please let me know. Thanks.
Thank you, Claire. Any questions for Claire on this report or press conference? No. So thanks for reminding us of this release. Just before we leave the issue of press conferences, let me remind you also that on the 1st of September, on Wednesday, 1st of September at 11 a.m., the ILO will hold a press conference to launch the World Social Protection Report 2020-2022, Social Protection at the Crossroads in Pursuit of a Better Future. This report is under embargo until the day of the press conference, Wednesday, 1st of September at 1 p.m. Geneva time. And the speakers at the press conference will be Guy Ryder, ILO Director General, and Shara Razavi, the Director of ILO's Social Protection Department. I've got a few announcements to read to you, one on behalf of the Human Rights Council. The Human Rights Council would like to announce that the organizational meeting for the regular 48th session of the Council will be held on Monday, 30th of August from 3 p.m. on. That will be in room 20. Due to continuing COVID restrictions, the organizational meeting will follow the similar modalities as the recent Human Rights Council meetings and sessions, as will the 48th session itself. In-person participation will therefore be strictly limited, and the meeting is due to be webcast on webtv.un.org. As for the 48th regular session of the Council, please be reminded that this is scheduled to be held from the 13th of September to the 8th October 2021. This is to say that will be 4 full weeks of work, 1 week longer than it is standard for the Human Rights Council session held regularly at this time of the year, so it's 4 weeks. Ambassador Nazat Khan, President of the Human Rights Council, will duly brief the press on 8th of September. There will be more information about this press briefing, but for now, her focus remains Monday's organizational meeting at 3 p.m. And of course, the media team will send regular updates on the 40th session in the coming weeks. Another announcement comes to us from FAO. The Food and Agriculture Organization, in partnership with the International Telecommunication Union, are convening a virtual forum of leaders from small island developing states next week in a major push forward to help its members regain their momentum toward achieving the Sustainable Development Goals. The SIDS Solutions Forum 2021, that's the name of the forum, will be held on Monday 30 and Tuesday 31st of August, co-hosted by the government of Fiji. These two-day virtual events will have a high-level participation. Heads of states and governments from 8 Pacific Island countries will be joined by representatives from 6 countries in the Americas, in the Caribbean, and African and Indian Ocean SID as well. Ministers holding key government portfolio related to agriculture, food, nutrition, environment, health, and ICTs will also participate and play leading roles, as well as representatives from the UN agencies, private sector, civil society, and others. A save the date for the Solutions Forum and a media advisory with a link to the web page has been circulated to you, together with the provisional program and a high-level list of participants. Please note that the event will start at 9 p.m. Rome and Geneva time on 29 August 2021, so that would be the night before. FAO encouraged Geneva-based correspondents to register and follow the events. And then 2 more points. The Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities is beginning today at noon the review of the report of Djibouti, which will continue next Monday and Wednesday at 12:30 every day, every time. The Conference on Disarmament will hold its next public plenary meeting next Tuesday, 31st of August at 10 a.m. It will inter alia hear the last speakers of the debate on the participation of women in international security, which started yesterday afternoon. It shall then continue its review of the draft annual report to the GA as submitted by its president. And I just would like to add, you may remember that I think it was a couple of weeks ago, there was a discussion about gender-related language at the CD. Some of you, I remember Lisa and somebody else asked questions about gender-related language at the United Nations. We have done a little bit of work and we've looked into the regulations. We have an update for you, which we will send straight away after the briefing so that you can get some more information. There is also a dedicated website on this issue toolbox, and you will be able to get a little bit more information about this matter. And I see Lisa has a question.
Yep, it's for you, Alessandra, regarding the press conference at 1:30. Is there is this going to be an appeal, or at least will they have some kind of money? You know, how much money they're going to need, or that they might appeal for at a certain point, whether there will be any sort of a special conference, pledging conference to this? I mean, if you could just give a little more information of what's expected. Thank you.
Yes, indeed, Lisa. I'm afraid Andrei was connected, but he's not anymore. Ekaterini is. I don't know, Ekaterini, if you have any update on this or any other colleague. What I understand is the launch of a plan. So I guess there will be some. Oh, here we are. Oh, Andrei, you are connected. Hi. That's great.
Yes. Hi, Alessandra. Yes, thank you very much. Just to say that this will be the presentation of the plan. There will be some elements of that plan shared, obviously, that will include the currently projected financial needs. So I invite you to attend the event at 1:30 for the details, obviously, that we can share at that point. Thank you. Over.
Thank you very much. I see Laurent has a question. I don't know if it's for Andrei too.
Yeah, both to you and Andrei, actually. It's a follow-up. The Swiss foreign minister has repeatedly said that Switzerland was ready to organize a conference, being either a political one or a donors conference on Afghanistan if needed. Are you aware of preparations for such a conference? Thank you.
Not that I know of, but any
No,
colleague
I have nothing on this.
Yeah, Andrei saying no, and I don't see any other colleague taking the floor. Let me ask, but I haven't heard anything about that at the moment. Any other question for Andrei or for me? If this is not the case, let me just remind you a last point, because we are very happy that we are back in person with Cinéonu Geneva. We are going to return to the cinema downtown, Cinérama Empire, on Sunday, 29th of August, this Sunday at 11 a.m. If you would like to join us for a funny and bittersweet documentary called When Tomatoes Met Wagner. And this projection will be followed on a discussion on sustainable agriculture. I think you have received the information about this event, which coincides with the city of Geneva's Festi Terroir, which is a large farmers market highlighting local agriculture, organic production, and direct sales from producer to consumers, which will take place in the Parc des Bastions from the 27th to the 29th. So we will have this discussion afterwards, and we hope that you will join us and the Permanent Mission of Greece and the Ville de Genève, with which we have partnered for organizing this Cinéonu. Very happy to be again in person there. So if there is no other question, I thank you all very much. Wish you a very good weekend, and see you at 1:30 for the presser on the plan for Afghanistan. Thank you.